It started as an ordinary Thursday night. My husband, James, had invited his old college friend Daniel over for dinner. They hadn't seen each other in nearly 7 years, and I'd heard endless stories about their wild youth. I had never met Daniel before. He'd been living overseas for most of our marriage. But I welcomed the idea of seeing James light up with nostalgia. When Daniel arrived, he brought with him not only a bottle of wine, but also an energy I didn't expect. He was charming, warm, effortlessly attentive. I noticed his eyes lingered a little longer than necessary when we spoke. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Dinner flowed with laughter and old memories. But as the night went on and James had won too many drinks and fell asleep on the couch, Daniel and I stayed up talking, for hours. It started with stories, then shifted to more personal terrain. His divorce, my struggles with feeling invisible in my own marriage. The conversation grew vulnerable, uncomfortably so. It felt dangerous, yet I didn't stop it. Something changed in that quiet living room. We didn't touch, not then, but we connected emotionally in a way I hadn't experienced in years. He saw me, not as James's wife, but as a woman with her own needs and longings. That night, nothing physical happened, but a boundary had definitely been crossed. Over the next few weeks, Daniel stayed in town. He visited often under the guise of catching up, and James encouraged it. The tension between Daniel and me escalated in silence, in glances, in almosts, and eventually it happened. One night, when James was away for a work trip, Daniel and I slept together. The guilt afterward was unbearable, but also confusing. I wasn't in love with Daniel. I wasn't trying to sabotage my marriage, but I had been starving for affection, for attention, for someone to ask me how I was. Really. The affair wasn't about sex. It was about being seen. When James found out weeks later, he read a message on my phone. The fallout was brutal, not rage, but heartbreak. He looked at me like a stranger. And maybe I had become one, even to myself. We started therapy. It's still raw. Some days we're rebuilding. Some days we're just trying to breathe through it. I don't justify what I did. But I also now understand how emotional neglect can grow into a silence so loud that someone else's voice feels like rescue. James had been talking about Daniel's visit for weeks, and I could tell he was genuinely excited. They'd shared so much of their youth, late night road trips, failed business ventures, college heartbreaks. When Daniel finally arrived, there was that immediate click between the two men, the kind only time can preserve. What I didn't expect was the click I'd feel too. He was charismatic but not in a forced way, confident but not arrogant. And while James talked over him with stories he'd told me a dozen times before, Daniel listened to both of us. During dinner, he looked at me when I spoke, not through me, not around me, not waiting for his turn to speak. That was new. James had stopped noticing the little things. He didn't ask me about my day anymore unless it directly impacted his. But Daniel asked how I spent my mornings, if I still painted, what books I liked. He remembered the details I casually mentioned and brought them up later. I caught myself smiling more in one night than I had in weeks. As the evening wore on and the wine took over, James drifted off on the couch, mouth open, snoring softly. Daniel and I were left at the table, the soft hum of the dishwasher the only sound between us. I remember the pause before he spoke again. He hesitated, like he knew the next words might open a door. "You look tired, not just physically. You okay?" I nodded too quickly, afraid that if I answered honestly, the dam would break. But I didn't have to say much. Daniel saw it in my face, and somehow that made it worse. I wasn't looking for anything. I wasn't even aware of how deeply I'd buried my loneliness, until someone pulled it out without trying. I caught myself studying his face while he spoke, memorizing the creases near his eyes, the way he tilted his head when he listened. I hated myself a little for it. This was James's best friend. But somewhere between the second glass of wine and the way Daniel laughed at something I said, a real laugh, not a distracted chuckle, I realized I felt something dangerous, alive. Later that night, while I was in the kitchen alone rinsing the dishes, he walked in, stood beside me, close but not touching. He didn't say a word. I felt heat rise in my chest, guilt already setting in. He handed me a towel and our hands brushed. Innocent but electric, we both froze, the air between us thickened. I said nothing, he said nothing, but everything was said in that pause. James never noticed. He kissed me good night like he always did, mindlessly, quickly, but my mind was racing. The evening had started with nostalgia and laughter. It ended with a storm of emotions I didn't know I was capable of feeling anymore. The days that followed should have returned to normal, but they didn't. Daniel stayed in town longer than expected, something about needing time to recharge before heading back to Europe. James was thrilled, practically handing him a spare key. I told myself the pull I felt that first night was just a moment, a fluke. But then there were more moments. He started coming by during the day when James was at work. Nothing prearranged. It always felt casual. He'd drop off something James forgot, then stay for coffee, or I'd find him walking the dog because he missed having a Labrador around. Every visit chipped at the wall I was trying to rebuild. The way he noticed when I changed my earrings. The way he remembered I didn't like sugar in my tea. The way he looked at me like he was trying to memorize something. We didn't touch, but we didn't need to. The silence between us was louder than any words. Once he watched me struggle with a heavy box in the garage and immediately stepped in. Our hands brushed again, this time for a beat longer. His hand stayed near mine afterward, just hovering. I could feel the warmth of it on my skin long after he left. The guilt was a constant, quiet ache. I'd lie beside James at night, his back turned to me as always, and wonder if he even noticed how far I'd drifted emotionally. We hadn't had a real conversation in weeks. He was either on his phone or talking about work. Sometimes I stared at the back of his neck and wondered what we were even holding onto anymore. One afternoon, Daniel came by when James was stuck at a client meeting. I told him not to stay, that I needed space to clear my head, but I didn't mean it. Or maybe I did, but not enough. We sat on the back porch saying little. He mentioned leaving town the following week. My chest tightened in a way I didn't expect. I told him stupidly that I'd miss having someone to talk to. His response was soft, careful. You should never feel that lonely in your own home. That sentence unraveled something in me. That night I kissed him. It happened fast and slow at the same time. We were standing in the kitchen, dishes half done, same as that first night. I turned to hand him something, and instead of taking it, he looked at me, really looked, and I leaned in before I could think. Our lips met like it had already happened 100 times in our minds. No passion, not at first, just tenderness, familiarity, sadness. We broke apart seconds later, both of us breathing heavily, shocked at ourselves. "I'm sorry," I whispered, but neither of us moved away. Something had shifted permanently, and I knew there was no taking it back.